Yo, what's up? I got a question from a supporter on Patreon, someone who's committed to spend $1 a month to support this channel, my recording and uploading new content. A question inviting me to comment on nuclear power. So this question comes from a woman named Kelly. I say that because there are also men named Kelly. Anyway, what up, Kelly? Kelly expresses her concern that vegans ought to have a responsible and balanced attitude towards nuclear power, nuclear energy, as a useful technology in a period of transition. And when she expresses that, in her own words, I think she's actually expressing a majority opinion, or an opinion that is at least backed by the majority of people who are in positions of power and influence within governments around the world. The technocratic consensus is that nuclear power is preferable to and superior to coal power, gas power plants, other fossil fuel sources, and that we should have a detached attitude towards the risks and the environmental hazards of nuclear power generation until such time as a really superior technology comes along. So Kelly may feel like her view is marginalized or treated as extreme or unusual amongst vegans. It's certainly possible that in the political circles she lives in, that she's regarded as very unusual for having that view, but it's not an unusual view. And she wrote to me in response to my recent video criticizing Jill Stein, the woman who is currently the leader of the Green Party of the United States of America, a woman who is currently running for President of the United States of America on a Green Party ticket. So what is my view of nuclear power? Nuclear power, its risks, etc., have been a recurring issue from my earliest childhood memories through to my adult life today. It has been an issue everywhere I've lived, in Asia, in Canada, in Europe. It comes up again and again. It's being re-examined from different angles at different times. And today, in 2016, sadly, the lessons that might have been learned from the disaster in Japan, the Fukushima Daiichi reactor meltdown, that event is quickly disappearing from public memory, from the consideration of the public record, and there were very, very serious political lessons to be learned from that. In terms of human nature and practical political science, we always need to be aware that when we design something to work under certain conditions, the opposing conditions, the inclement conditions, incompatible conditions, will inevitably arise somewhere, sometime. I remember speaking with someone who was an ardent supporter of nuclear power under absolutely all circumstances. I had to say, look, even if you believe this solution is safe, when you're talking about a newly constructed power plant in southern Ontario under the oversight of the Canadian government, how do you feel about this nuclear power plant? And simply by using Google and Wikipedia, I had come up with some examples from Venezuela and other South American countries, some of them constructed in the 1970s, some in the early 1980s, and as soon as I knew the names of those power plants, I could very rapidly Google and see scientists, experts, nuclear physicists, etc., scientists expressing their concern that these specific reactors were of tremendous danger to the public, tremendous danger to the environment, and that the government's concern really did not have the budget or the expertise to properly and safely regulate them, operate them, etc. And in some cases, the aging infrastructure, the fact that they were built in the 1970s or early 1980s, that was itself part of the problem, part of the concern. Now, if you go through step by step the human decisions and the hubris, but the human decisions made step by step in Japan, Fukushima Daiichi, there are terrible, terrible lessons to be learned from that. One of the great overarching themes is that people in positions of power in our era, people who wear business suits with suspenders and who are part of the bureaucracy, people who believe in statism, people who themselves are instruments of the state, but who regard the state as having an instrumental role that they control and manipulate. Those people tend to have overweening confidence in their own social class and in that elite class's ability to handle all emergencies, all unforeseen problems under all circumstances. And of course, from time to time, whether it's a nuclear disaster or just a natural disaster such as Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, from time to time we see just how hollow those pretensions are, how their overweening confidence in themselves as a social class as a group of technocrats, as a group of experts, how really ill-founded that confidence is. And when those things go disastrously wrong, who is responsible? Who really deals with the consequences? Obviously, in Japan, it is not particularly the corporation that was profiting from the status quo before the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. When I was living in Canada, I was watching with great interest, this was many years ago, the privatization of some of our nuclear facilities. So the public sector handing these over to the private sector, and they had contracts that were guaranteeing these companies that the companies would not be responsible in the event of an accident and so on. Now, again, if you go through a checklist of under what conditions is such a facility safe and reliable, and there are such checklists, and I've been to one museum that I remember explained to me those checklists. I'm sure actually that Canada does have some of the safest and most reliable reactors in the world. Would I, however, extend similar confidence to Venezuela? How about Cambodia? How about Laos? How about China? How about Japan? And one of the most hilarious, but again telling in terms of human nature, the history of the Sellafields facility in England, in the United Kingdom, shows that wealthy Western countries can indeed have bad, non-transparent bureaucracy, mismanagement, poor decisions, lack of accountability, lack of transparency, and can make the same mistakes in operating a nuclear facility that a third world country would make. So, the rule here in political science is that any project requiring management, we must prepare for the inevitability of mismanagement. And when the stakes are so high, when the consequences for mismanagement are so terrible as they are in the case of nuclear power plants, how really reasonably and responsibly can we organize our society to deal with that technology? Now, to some extent, we are dealing with it. The disaster that happened in Japan doesn't happen every month, doesn't happen every year. It is rare, it is exceptional. To some extent, all of these societies all over the world, completely diverse in their political backgrounds, in their bureaucratic cultures, in their levels of wealth or their levels of poverty, they're all in different ways coping with this constant danger. The reality of nuclear power being used as an energy source of transition, it's already here. I mean, we don't have to debate it. That's how currently the whole world operates. The first world, the third world, Africa, Europe, Asia, I say everywhere I've lived, this is part of the reality of modern life. So, in so many ways, the debate is over, and the person writing to me, Kelly, your side of the debate has already won. The real problems here, I feel, are not technological, and they're not even ecological in a limited sense. Really, the strongest party for criticizing the dangers of nuclear power would be the anarchist perspective, would be anarchists who can point out what the problems are with statism, with the attitudes of people in authority, who, in such a facile way, can fall into a sense of invulnerability, just a sense of self-justification, a sense that, put it this way, they lose the fear, the skepticism, the procedural vigilance that is so necessary with a technology like nuclear power. However, nuclear power is not unique in this way. Actually, if you look at the technologies we rely upon at sewage treatment plants, both to ensure the safety of our own drinking water and to ensure that sewage being treated and being reintroduced into ecosystems, whether it goes into a lake or a river or the ocean, those technologies also are terrifying. And if there's one incompetent drunk in the factory for just one day, that actually can result in a whole city of people getting food poisoning, waterborne illness, whatever you want to say. And if there, it can result in polluting a whole ecosystem terribly, and so on. So there are other public services, there are other technologies in the service of public good this way that may fall under private sector control, that may fall under public sector control, or maybe a hybrid of the two, where we have to ask the same questions. And while I am not an anarchist, and I don't even sympathize with anarchism, I think this is an interesting case where actually the rigor of an anarchist perspective, can be really a useful gadfly. So that's a Socratic reference. In a useful way, it can stimulate us to question our assumptions and to realize that beneath the veneer of seemingly responsible men in blue suits and ties, even in a wealthy country like Japan, there can be profound incompetence, a profound lack of responsibility, a profound lack of accountability, and in fact, beneath the veneer of that professionalism, we can be, sowing the seeds of a disaster where none of us really can ever be accountable for the long-term consequences.